Good evening and welcome to our weekly town hall live meeting. This evening it's going to be a little bit more of an open forum, and so as I'm waiting for people to join us, I'm just going to go over a couple of things. First and foremost, my name is Richard Tucker and I'm running for District 56 Minnesota Senate seat. And if our values align, if as you listen to the various town hall meetings that I have done and different things that I have written, and if you feel like our values are aligned and you agree and support me, then I would love to have your support. I'd love to have you have a sign in your yard. I'd love to have a donation. I'd love, most importantly, for you to vote. And so let me talk a little bit about early voting and what that means. Beginning June 26th through August 10th, you can go to the polls, Savage City Hall, Burnsville City Hall, Lakeville City Hall, and you can vote in the primary, normal business hours, but you can get what's called a no excuse absentee ballot. So please make sure you do that, because the support and everything is wonderful, but the vote is absolutely the most important thing. And the support I have received and the feedback I've received from so many people has been wonderful, but you have to vote. And so the way to vote is to go and do that, or you can go to the Secretary of State's website and ask to have a ballot mailed to you, and you can fill that out, and they will send a ballot to you and you can fill that out. And you do not need a witness as in the past. Now you may in the general election, but in the primary right now, you will not need a witness for signatures, so you don't have to worry about breaking quarantine or anything else relative to COVID-19. So that I wanted to make sure we got that message out in front. So this evening, as I said, this is going to be a little bit more of an open forum, but I wanted to touch on three things that I think are very important that happened this week, and that will maybe lead us into some of the questions and some of the discussion. First thing that I want to talk about is the court ruling that came down, the Supreme Court, on LGBTQ, and the absolute win and the historic significance of that decision. And for a court that most people thought was a 5-4 conservative court to come down 6-3 in favor of and in support of the rights of LGBTQ, and the fact that you cannot fire someone for sexual orientation is a huge win and a very important ruling. And so I think that's one of the things that have come out this week. And obviously the conservatives and Republicans are up in arms, but it was a tremendous decision by the court. And the second thing was the decision by the court that came out today on DACA. This is a wonderful win. It's tremendously important. However, as important a win as it is because of the court's ruling, the court really ruled on a technicality. And really what we need to do is make sure that this is codified into law, and the legislature needs to step up and make this part of a legal framework, as opposed to just keeping the protection alive because it's a technicality that Justice Roberts outlined. So really, really important that we move forward on that. And in fact, I just want to take a second and talk about, because when we talk about immigration, and I just want to at least share my feelings of where I stand relative to immigration. And it's such a topic for some people, a negative topic for some people. And I think you're missing the point. The immigration story is absolutely a story of sacrifice. It's a story of hope. It's a story of people who want and believe in the future. If you think about what people who have emigrated to this country go through, the battle they go through to get here, to come to a place that quite frankly is not very welcoming to them. And they do that because they believe in the future for themselves, but more importantly, they believe in the future for their children. And that, how do you not recognize that? How do you not embrace, or at least understand that that's what the immigration story is about? And in virtually all of us have come that path. And so, and I know everybody says, yes, but some did it legally. We have a broken immigration system. So to make that argument is a felonious argument, because we have a broken immigration system. And so that doesn't hold water in my book anymore. But I think you have to recognize the immigration story for what it is. And so I think it's very important that the DACA decision that came down today. The third thing I wanted to talk about is, and one of the reasons I'm running, and one of the reasons I think it's absolutely imperative that we replace the Republican Senate is the insistence that they adjourn on Friday without taking the opportunity to tackle really tremendous legislation that needs to and has been proposed by the people of color and Indigenous Caucus, has laid out some tremendous opportunities in terms of framework and some real substantial legislation that could be embraced and really move us forward in the issues that we're facing relative to systemic racism. And they have chosen not to do that. They have chosen to walk away from that. They've chosen to simply grab a little low-hanging fruit, as the governor said, and not really seize this opportunity and insist that they just slow walk this and adjourn on Friday. And so one more reason where I absolutely think it's critical that we replace it, and that your vote for me to replace Dan Hall is absolutely critical, because we cannot continue to do this dance that the Republicans are doing. And I think it's an embarrassment to Minnesota, and it's an embarrassment to us. So I think those are three of the things I wanted to really kind of jump into here this evening to talk about that. One of the questions that's come up this week to me that I want to kind of touch on, it kind of, first time this question came to me, I will be honest with you, kind of caught me off guard, and I wasn't sure how to respond to it. And the question was, how do I define white privilege? And I'll be candid, the first time somebody said that to me and said, you have to own your white privilege, my dander got up, my back got up, and I thought, well, hold it. My parents worked hard and provided an opportunity, and I worked hard, and they're, but if you just take a second, if you just reflect on it for a minute, the reality is I absolutely am a product of white privilege. I was born with some tremendous opportunities, but one of the things that I know is that one of the things I didn't have, looking over my shoulder, is the worry and the fear that comes, quite frankly, with being a black man in this country today, or a black woman, candidly. But I didn't have to face into that. I didn't have that. And so I will be fully acknowledge that I am a benefit of white privilege and have see that. And because of that, I recognize that systemic racism is a tremendous concern in our society. It impacts us on healthcare. It impacts us on education. It impacts us on gun violence. So all of these it impacts us on housing. So these are all ways that we need to work. And this, again, goes back to what I said a moment ago in terms of the Republican and not choosing to begin that process, because clearly even the recommendations that came through the policy caucus were just dealing with one set of policing policy related issues and criminal justice related issues. There's such a bigger piece of this that covers all the other parts of our society that we need to jump into. So somebody said to me, how do you define that and how do you do that? And as I say, the first time that came to me, I wasn't sure I liked the question, but the more I thought about it, and over the last couple of years, I've really come to recognize that I absolutely do. And I have to own that, and I have to recognize that because of that, I also have the opportunity to do something about it and to work to help those who have not been given some of the opportunities because of the color of their skin. We have to work hard to eliminate discrimination. And so I have an opportunity to do that. And that is one of the platforms that I'm running on, is how do we move forward and how do we eliminate some of the systemic racism in our society? So that was one of the other things I wanted to touch on. I also had said last week that we were going to not be here, and I apologize at the very end. I don't know if everybody got to the very end, but that we were going to be dealing with climate, and that actually turns out I had my dates wrong. That's next Thursday. We're going to be dealing with climate change, and there's going to be an open forum that we've been invited to participate in and talk about how do we move forward on dealing with climate change and the environment. So that will be next week at the same time, and hopefully everybody will be able to be part of that as well. So I'm looking here for some questions. I don't see any yet, so I'm going to grab one that I had from earlier today. Well, let me go back to one other point I wanted to make relative to the white privilege, and I had a chance to read today on Dan Hall's website, where he talks about faith, family, and freedom. And I think the thing that you need to understand, and what he's really talking about there, is he's talking about his family, his freedom, and not recognizing all of the other faiths that we have in this community, all of the other families, and quite frankly, the freedom that is needs to be enjoyed by everybody, not just people that look like Dan Hall or, quite frankly, look like me, but everybody is entitled to those freedoms. And so when you think about that, it's a very narrow definition. And what we're really looking at, and what I am really running hard and believe in and will fight for, is to expand that to everybody who's part of this community, because I think that's a critical thing, and we need to do a better job at that. So one of the other questions I think that had come up when we were talking about the court ruling on DACA, we also need long-term immigration reform, and we have kicked this can down the road for 30, 40 years. And so granted, that's a federal issue, and that's something that we need to do on the federal side. But here in Minnesota, we can certainly embrace even some of the more basic things, even some of the more fundamental things, like providing driver's licenses, which went away about 15 years ago. And it's one of those things that makes no sense. And we need to go back to allowing even undocumented immigrants to have a driver's license. That actually does more to protect and help than to hinder. And so it's one of those things that we really do need to move forward on that. And so it's kind of crazy that we haven't done that. So looking to see if we got any other questions on here this evening. Hold on, let me look. I got a couple other things that came up earlier. You know, one of the other questions that came up is, what are the things that guide you? What are the platform pieces that you sustains you and that sort of forms your opinions? And so one of the things I'd like to, I guess, talk a little bit about is the fact that the way I view this is all people, race, religion, color, sexual orientation, regardless of who you are, whether you are an indigenous person or an immigrant, everybody in this state, in this country, quite frankly, deserves to be treated with dignity, equity, equality. And so when you look at that as a prism, and you look at that as to how we approach legislation, how we approach foundational things, you have to look at it from that point of view of, are we providing that? And then when we look at things like education, are we creating systems, an educational system, for example, that provides that equity and equality and opportunity for everybody, or are we just providing it for a certain few? And so from my perspective, and the things that I will fight for are making sure that those systems of our society are available and an equitable basis across all peoples, and not just if you happen to be born in Edina and you have an opportunity versus somewhere else. I want to make sure that everybody has the same level playing field, the same equal opportunities as they move forward. And as a society, that's part of our responsibility, to make sure that those institutions are fair and equitable for everybody. And so those are some of the things that I wanted to touch on as we kind of move forward. And I'm not seeing too many other questions here tonight. And so because it was kind of an open forum and I'm not seeing an awful lot of questions, I'm going to take one more area that I wanted to chit chat a little bit about tonight and focus area, and a little precursor to next week when we talk about climate. One of the concerns when we talk about climate, and first and foremost, and again, this goes back to my concern with why we need to make a change. When I look at where Dan Hall sits relative to climate and his denial of climate change, we have to face into the fact that science dictates that we have to make changes and we have to move quickly and reduce carbon. But it also talks about what we teach in our schools. And when you don't accept science relative to climate, it also means you're not willing to focus on teaching science in the schools. And one of the concerns that I have is when Dan talks about giving equal time to biblical explanations versus evolution, because evolution is in his mind a theoretical science, that tells you a great deal about the importance of science and the ability to rely upon science. And we can't do that. We absolutely have to understand and appreciate and use science to move us forward. And then when we talk about climate next week, that is one of the cornerstones. And we can't continue to put our head in the sand and pretend it doesn't exist, or take the hard action. And the other reason I hear that people want to avoid it is because we're going to impact jobs. Well, the reality is there are so many job opportunities that will be created as we move into a clean energy economy that we need to really start moving in that direction. And it's a little bit like the argument that says we don't want to invest in cars because we're going to destroy the carriage industry. We're going to destroy the buggy whip industry because we don't want to move forward with cars in terms of progress. Capital, labor all move in a direction. And in this case, they will move to the clean energy economy. And so on a macro level, we need to move in that direction because of not only is it a great economy, but it's also great for the climate, and that's something we need to move forward. We're going to talk more about that next week, and so that will be the focus of the conference. If you have any questions that you didn't want to send them in over the forum, please send them to me. I'd be happy to do that. As we're starting to get out and about, by the way, for those who are just joining in, my name is Richard Tucker, and I'm running for District 56 Senate seat. As we begin to open up the economy and open up, period, I am really looking forward to the opportunity to get out, to meet you in person, to get out and sit down and chat with you. I would love to have the opportunity. If you've got a group of people, I would love to reach out or have you reach out to me and find an opportunity. I would love to sit down and chat with you and really hear where your thoughts are, where you see some of these challenges, and what are some of the things that are most important to you as we move forward down this path, and how can I work with you to address those things. So again, as I said when I started, if your values align, if you agree with me, if the things that I'm talking about are important to you, then I really do ask for your support. I ask for your donation. I ask for permission to put a sign in your yard. But most important of everything else, I ask for your vote. And please remember, you can start voting June 26th to August 10th. You can do what's called a no excuse absentee ballot, and you can go into Lakeville, Burnsville, Savage, and vote. You can also request one from the Secretary of State's website and have it mailed to you. August 11th is the actual primary day, but you've got a long window ahead of time, and the most important thing you can do is actually go to the polls and vote, and that is your right and your privilege, and I hope you exercise that, and I really ask for your support and your vote. And with that, I'm going to say good evening, and I will see you next Thursday night. Thank you very much. And with that, I'm going to sign off.